All right, so it is going live now. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me for In the Know with CaT Bobino. My extra special guest is Dr. Proctor, and she is a geologist slash analog astronaut slash television personality, educator, everything. So thank you, Dr. Proctor, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to us having a fun chat.
Awesome. So, yes, tell us a little bit about you. What do you do on your day to day?
My regular day-to-day job is I'm a geoscience professor. I've been a community college professor for 21 years, and I love teaching. I teach being at the community college. I have students that are, 16, 17, all the way up to 60, 70 years old in the same classroom. I do a lot of online teaching also, but now this fall, I'm taking a new position within my district, the Maricopa Community College District, and I'm going to be the Open Educational Resource Coordinator. So getting people to adopt open educational resources to make the barrier to education that much easier.
That's awesome. So what made you do geoscience?
That's a really great question. When I've always loved science, I came from a family where my dad, he was a scientist, but he never got the opportunity to go to college formally and get a degree. Neither did my mom. So education was always really important to my dad. He always loved math and science. And so he encouraged me and my siblings from the earliest memories of you will go to school, you will go to college, you'll get a degree in science, because he saw that as the way to the American dream.
Wow. Okay. So in geoscience, what did you study? What are some of the things that you got to look at?
Well, it's really interesting because in undergrad, I got my degree in environmental science with a minor in mathematics. So what I loved about that degree, because I love all of the sciences. And what was great about this is that it enabled me to take a little physics and a little chemistry and a little biology and ecology and meteorology and oceanography and a bunch of math. And so I got to get this wide swath of the sciences. And then after that, I actually went home and became a video editor for a news channel for a couple of years. And then I decided to go on to graduate school. And when I went to graduate school, I ended up going to Arizona State University for geology, and I got my master's in geology, and that's where I learned more about the physical properties of the earth and the history of the earth, and also planetary geology and stuff like that. But I also took a lens of education, and so going there and having that experience and being a teaching assistant during my master's, I actually decided then that I wanted to be a community college professor. And so after getting my master's in geology, I started a PhD in science education so that I could become a good teacher. So I have the science and the teaching.
Okay, that's awesome. So I did TA work, and I gotta say, it wasn't something I decided I wanted to be a teacher about. So what is it about teaching that you like?
I really enjoyed at community college, 99% of my students are non-science majors. And there's something about getting somebody who isn't necessarily inspired by science, really loving it in the end. And so finding ways to connect them and their knowledge and the things that they're excited about with the science and the things that I wanted to teach them. And so I find that just a lot of fun. And so if I can take a group of 24 diverse students, diverse ages and backgrounds and stories, and then by the end, having them all saying to me that this is the best class I've ever taken and really loving science and the earth. And then I've done my job.
That is amazing. Yes, so geosciences is all encompassing when it comes to the work or the science behind it, and it's so many different career options. Do you find that some of your students are like, oh, I didn't know I can do this, and get excited?
Oh, that's the best part, because every once in a while I get a student who just gravitates so much to it that they want to change their major. They change their entire career. And that's when I know I did a really good job. And I've had students who are in their 50s tell me after taking one of my classes, I finally, this is the career that I want to do. And they'll go and work towards becoming a geologist. But also I've had students who have taken my planetary science class. And there was this one student who, she was a graphic artist, and this was online. So I was teaching this online class, and I get them to produce their own original kind of work, and to really understand their own knowledge and to take them on this journey through the solar system. And she would turn in the best videos on what she'd learned, and they were so in depth and so well done and so well researched that I would, every week I'd be like, wow, you should be a planetary scientist, you're so good. And then one day I ran into her on campus just randomly, and it was so exciting because I was like, hey, you should be a planetary scientist. And she was young, and her hair kind of fell over her eyes, and she was just kind of like shy, and she swept her hair away from her eyes and looked at me, and she goes, I really want to be, and I was like, you can be. And she just didn't have the confidence. And she literally changed her major from being a graphic artist to becoming a planetary scientist, and which requires a lot of math. And we started her on the road to taking the math classes and everything that she needed, and just pushing her through that program. And that's what I love, is that moment of discovering. It's the same kind of thing I felt when I stepped into the classroom and taught geology for the first time. That kind of like, I can do this. I really want to do this.
Yeah. So we were talking before we went live, and we've both been on the JOIDES resolution, except I was on it as it was parked in New Zealand, but Dr. Proctor was actually aboard the ship. And it's one of those things where, for me, that was my first introduction into the geosciences, being able to go and learn with School of Rock. And I, at my own age, which I don't need to share, did not realize how much you could do with geology.
Yeah, geology is the kind of the hidden gem of the sciences. And so we're talking about, just to give you an idea of the kind of things that I teach. So I have physical geology, which is all about the earth processes. So it's about rocks and minerals and how they form, but also rivers and mountains and landscapes and plate tectonics and all those kinds of things. But then I teach historical geology, which is the history of the entire Earth. Well, actually, we start from the Big Bang and the formation of the solar system, and then Earth, and then the Earth's history, but also life on Earth. So this is when we get into the dinosaurs and all of those kinds of things. And then I also teach geologic disasters and the environment, which is kind of more my specialty. And that's when we get into volcanoes and earthquakes and deadly weather and all the ways that the earth can kill you, but also resources like water resources, energy resources, mineral resources. I teach that also. And then I teach planetary geology, so a tour of the solar system and the geologic processes that are happening, and then also life in the universe. And so how do we look and search for life? And then as a geoscientist, I also teach sustainable cities and sustainable worlds. So the whole sustainability component and how humans interact with our environment. And I could teach all of those classes, or a good chunk of those classes, all in one semester. And so
Wow.
lots of stuff lots of branching.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. And like, from what I've gathered, what you just said, that means if there is like a really terrible natural disaster, we need to find you, because you know how to continue living on this earth.
It's funny you mentioned that, because yes, I spent my last sabbatical, not my last one, but the one before that, was at FEMA's Emergency Management Institute, helping to write their Science of Disasters curriculum. So yes, I'm very well aware of disasters, but the very first TV show that I did was The Colony. It was a post-apocalyptic build show on the Discovery Channel. The
Oh, wow.
premise was that a virus had wiped out most of humanity. You're a survivor. You're put together with other survivors, and you have to rebuild society. So you need energy. How are you going to generate it? You need water. What are you going to do? You need food. You need shelter. You need security. Yeah. So it was a crazy show. If anybody out there is watching, 2010, The Colony, Discovery
I
Channel.
have to look it up. How was that? Like trying to figure that out.
It was crazy, but it was fun. I learned a lot. That was my first introduction to reality TV. I learned that the difference between being book smart. So I came in with the highest education with my PhD, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have the best skill set, especially for surviving a disaster, because I may know how things work, but unless you're a mechanic or an electrical engineer or a plumber, or those are some, hands-on skills. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to my students, getting them to think about not only the science, but what are some of the hands-on things that you can learn to do and to manipulate and to make and to become a maker. It could be to
Yeah.
be creative.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. I mean, just because you know the science behind it and how it should work doesn't mean you know how to put it together and make it work.
Right. That's correct. And when it comes to the actual hooking things up and designing things and building things, it's such a valuable tools, valuable skills to have this day and age. And so a lot of times when we were back more of an agricultural community and we were living on farms and stuff, we were a lot more handy to some extent. Whether it was learning some of the domestic skills of cooking and sewing and creating our own clothes, all of those things, versus figuring out how machines and the mechanical stuff on the farm worked and things, to just being able to kill our own livestock instead of going to the grocery store. Like, how many of us would be able to survive if we had to catch our own food? The Colony, that was something we had to do, was figure out how to eat. And so to eat and to butcher an animal and to clean it properly and to be able to cook it, preserve it, all of those things.
Yeah, that's probably why. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I would survive because that would be very difficult for me. I think I could do it, but it would be hard for me to do.
And you'd have to, unless you have those skills, is how figuring out how to gain them. And because you don't want to gain them when you're in the crisis.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely look that show up because that's very interesting.
The best thing that I ever created was my it didn't actually end up in the show, but Discovery Channel actually cut it and released it, was Sian solar oven. So if you just Google that in YouTube, Sian solar oven, The Colony season 2, that's pretty awesome.
Okay.
It's on my YouTube channel too, if anybody wants to go
Your
there.
YouTube. What's your YouTube channel?
It's just Dr. Sian Proctor. And
Okay.
so I have videos from being on the Geordie's Resolution, interviews in 360. I have things from meals from Mars from when I lived as an analog astronaut in the high seas habitat. I have things from just a lot of my adventures on my website.
Yeah, let's talk about
on my website, on my YouTube channel, but I also have a website.
Let's talk about all your adventures. Like, how many programs have you been on, or have you lost count?
I've actually lost count, but I've been on quite a few. And, it was funny that we both were on Genius by Stephen Hawking, because that was the next big international show that I did. I did some local TV in between that, but Genius by Stephen Hawking, episode 2, Are We Alone? The Search for Extraterrestrials. I love that stuff. And so I did that. And then I got on Strange Evidence. I've been on Strange Evidence for, I think, 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. And then I've done little bits and episodes here and there of like What's on Earth, NASA's Unexplained Files, what else? A World Without NASA. I've got a new one that's going to be released this fall called Signals. So just interesting things like that. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And like, so how do you feel about doing television? How does integrating education and science and doing it for TV, how does that feel for you?
I really like it. The best kind of TV that I've ever done has been for Strange Evidence, where they actually have me come in and demo the science behind something. Because a lot of times now they just want me to share my expertise on how things work. So maybe there's something happening like a landslide and I can explain the physics or the geology behind the processes, which is okay, but it's usually just me sitting in a chair like this, chatting. Whereas I would really, really like when I get an opportunity to mix two chemicals together and talk about the reaction that's happening, or to be able to scientifically break something down and visually actually show that.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite things with Genius with Stephen Hawking. Is like they don't tell you what you're going to do. They kind of just throw it at you and they're like, okay, explain it, because what do you think this is? And you're like, oh, okay, well, this is this and this is this, but it's super hands-on, and you get to like actually physically do things while trying to explain it.
That was one of my favorite things too, is being able to do those kinds of things and just really investigate, like, wait, what is this? Okay, I think this is what's happening here. And that's so much fun. And the nice thing about being a geoscientist is that the Earth is full of all kinds of great mysteries and puzzles and interesting things that we can go and explore. The ocean, being on the JOIDES resolution for 2 months and looking at the core samples that were being brought up, and that was amazing. But also as a NOAA teacher at sea and being on I was on a fisheries boat for a month with NOAA, and just I was amazed at how some of the things, and you can go again to my YouTube channel and you can see the videos that I created during that time. Or I did a polar trek to Barrow, Alaska.
Twice, and I've been denied twice. But,
oh, for polar trek?
Yes.
Oh, polar trek's awesome, but the problem is that they don't take community college people anymore. But I love the polar trek people, and so now that I'm doing more second education outreach in a different way, maybe I'll be able to apply again, because that was one of the best programs I'd done.
Yeah, and like that's one of the things I love is doing these programs, but then sharing it with the community. And it's like I get to tell other students, hey, did you even know that this program existed? Like, you can do this. These are things you can do. These are opportunities for you. And because I feel like I didn't even hear about half of this stuff till I got to my mid-30s.
Oh, same with me. Oh, I absolutely. And so it's funny because there's so many opportunities now that didn't exist when I was going through, especially my undergrad and even to some extent my master's. And so now when I talk to students, I'm like, are you kidding me? You have the internet. I had to handwrite stuff. I had a typewriter when I went to college. Okay. So you have the internet, and there is so many things that you can apply for these days. And really just experience all that our world has to offer, from traveling to doing science communication, science research and investigation, and all of those things. It's just
awesome. That's what I like to share. And I'm just like, do you guys really like when I went to college, we were still going to the library, pulling out the drawer to look for a book, so
I'm right there with you. Oh yeah.
I didn't have all these resources, but students now have so much at their fingertips. And I'm like, if I can get to do some of this stuff today, you definitely can. You know,
And I think to some extent they feel overwhelmed because to me, I'm like, well, just Google. You can put in a couple of keywords and all kinds of stuff will come up. But again, now it's funny because there was this really interesting sweet spot of the internet, and now it's kind of this huge amount of information out there. And so one of the things that I work on with students is how do you weed out the noise and get to the information that is relevant and that is valid and the validity of information and stuff. And so getting into those kinds of things are so important now because there's so much.
it is. It's a lot of things. And sometimes it takes a professor to point out what's a good one, what's a bad one, maybe this is more your speed, but for me, I'm at the point of my life, especially with science and STEM education, I just apply for all of it. Just, hey, yeah. I'll go, pick me, I'll do it.
And what's interesting about that is that's what's great is that message, because a lot of times we'll talk ourselves out of opportunity. Oh, they'll never pick me. I'm not qualified. I'm like, let them tell you that. Don't talk yourself out of it. And so that was one of the things that I learned was just go for it and let them decide. And I learned that lesson in 2009. A person sent me an email saying NASA's looking for astronauts, you should apply. And I was like, did you send that to the right person? Mm-hmm. I'm just a community college professor. You put that just in front of it. I'm like, you think I could be? But they were like, you should apply. And I didn't even know what the application process was. And I opened it up and it was funny because I was like, looking at all the qualifications, I'm like, scuba certified, check. Pilot's license, check. Traveled around the world, cultural experience, check. PhD, check. I'm like, I'm qualified. But I still had to get over that stigma of thinking that they would not take me or even look at me because I'm just a community college professor. But I applied and I ended up being a finalist. I mean, I got to go to Johnson Space Center and meet amazing people. And it got down to a yes/no phone call. And even though it was a no phone call, it changed my life. And as a result, I'm standing here, sitting here in my analog astronaut, like in the last 10 years. So that was in 2009. I mean, I've lived in 4, 5 Mars moon simulations and helping to advance human space flight, but here on Earth.
That's amazing. So tell us the definition. What is an analog astronaut?
An analog astronaut is somebody who engages in human spaceflight research and training, but here on Earth. And so what that means is that my favorite thing to do is to live in Moon and Mars simulations. So my first analog was 2 weeks at the Mars Desert Research Station in 2013. And then we went into the high seas habitat. And both of these were funded by NASA for 4 months. So I lived in this dome, which is above my head right here. I actually took that picture of the dome at night. I'm like getting my orientation right. But it's on the big island of Hawaii, but I lived there for 4 months investigating food strategies for long duration space flight. And so that, again, was just a transformative experience, just with the people I was living with, the research that we were doing, the interactions, what I learned. And so that kind of have set me up for, this background behind you, my love of space and space exploration.
And how was it living there for 4 months?
It was good. I feel very fortunate in that, again, this is one of those things where you start to test yourself. Now, ahead of that, I've traveled a lot. And so it wasn't uncommon for me to go overseas for 2 months during the summertime to do like a faculty exchange. And so I'm used to living abroad or doing things like that. But I'd also done the colony, and the colony we shot that for 2 months in an area of New Orleans that hadn't recovered from Katrina. And so I lived in, you can only go up from there. If you're living in an apocalyptic world for the Discovery Channel, going to Mars is a walk in the park, in my opinion. But one of the things is for 4 months is that how do you not get bored or fatigued once the novelty wears off? And so those are some of the things that NASA's interested in too. And for me, it was about pacing and figuring out how to pace myself so I had something unique and novel all the way to the end that I could do. And one of the things was doing astrophotography at night. And so shooting that picture, I was really lucky because I had a contract for Discover magazine at the time, and I really wanted to try and get the cover of Discover magazine. And because originally we thought this article that I was participating in. So Kate Green was in the High Seas Habitat with me, and she came in as a science writer. So she had contracts for Discover magazine, for The Economist, and a couple of other ones that she was contracted to write for. And she needed a photographer. So she reached out to me as the education outreach officer and said, hey, will you be my official photographer? And so I was like, I'm an amateur. She's like, don't worry, just talk to Discover magazine. And we worked it out. So I was like, they were like, this is going to be printed. And then the guy was like, if you can get a really great shot, maybe we'll use it as the cover. And I was like, but it never happened. It ended up that they did it as an online release. But I shot that shot. I learned how to do some night photography. You can't see it very well in here, but the Milky Way goes right through the top of that scene. And I got that photo the very last day we were in the High Seas Habitat. It was, I'd worked months to try to get the right shot, and then that happened. And I was like, yes, I did it.
I feel like there's so much to dissect of what you just said, but my overall feeling from it is jealousy, maybe. I'm somewhat jealous of all these great things you've gotten to do. I'm like, goodness, that's okay. So now I have found a new role model. So I will be giving you more and more.
But the thing about it is you're doing it. You're just doing it at your pace because you're applying and you're teaching yourself and you're pushing yourself to do new things, like the show that you're doing and the things that you really want to do. So what I'm realizing now is that instead of waiting for somebody to offer us a show, let's just do the show that we want to do. Because why not? We've got the technology now. It's just the willpower to actually execute it. And so I've been thinking a lot about that.
Yeah, and we can talk more about that. But, and it's good virtually. But I would love, like I told you previously, going to visit people and seeing the jobs that they do. Now, that takes money because you got to travel and all that stuff. But it's still a goal, and it's still something that I am working towards. Now, what I was going to say is 4 months in a habitat, that means you're doing okay during this pandemic stay at home because you're used to being inside, right?
Yes and no. I mean, the thing about living, even doing the colony or doing a Mars simulation is we had an end date. And that makes a big difference psychologically because we knew when we were getting out. We had a countdown calendar. And so for the people who are worldwide going through self-isolation, social distancing, all of these things, but also having to deal with people who, loved ones and family members that are getting sick and passing away. It is such a trying emotional time. And I'm a traveler. And so I can't remember the last time that I stayed during my summer vacation in Phoenix, Arizona. It's 112 outside. I don't leave my house because it's just too hot outside. And so it does play psychologically. And so that's why really important to figure out ways to stretch yourself, to entertain yourself, to take on new hobbies and things. So I started my own Space to Inspire studio, which we're in, but I started creating artwork. I'll actually grab some.
Okay.
Because I'm very proud of my, I call it my Afronaut space. And so I create these kind of like postcards that are, really interesting and unique. But they have just a fun kind of take on space and from an African American female perspective. And so this is stuff that I'd never done before, but just making art. And so I do that now in my studio, and I do little things of just trying to connect with people in interesting ways, and that keeps me busy and moving forward, but it is exhausting. And so there are days when I have to take a mental health break and just be like, whoa, I need to just watch TV or watch some new show that's on. I just binged The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. Have you seen it?
About it. I couldn't get into it. I think I watched the first 2 episodes and I couldn't really get into it, but so many people love it. I've seen it on social media, how many people are like really into the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, I kind of like those kind of shows, and then The Expanse and things, just or sometimes just watching a romantic comedy or just something that I can just detach for a moment and not have to think about all of the things that are happening that are outside of my control.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yes. And I gotta say, because just to be honest, I'm getting divorced during COVID. So I'm right in the middle of packing up and moving out of my house that I love. And I'm gonna end up moving in with my brother for a little while. And so that's gonna be a big transition that, I haven't lived with my brother since I was 16 years old.
Yeah, and wow, I mean, thank you for being transparent, because I'm sure that's tough on you. I mean, to share your transparency, I am 6 months pregnant and looking for my own place to live. And it's hard to find a place to live in a pandemic because none of the apartments want to show you. You can't walk in, and it's hard to even get somebody on the phone. And I'm just like, I would really like this to work out before I pop in November.
Oh, wow. That is another whole level. And so,
yes.
Yeah, good luck on that search.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I have places to stay. It's not like I'm on the street, but I just need my own space. I don't know if anyone understands the ideal part of just being in your own space where you don't have to share with anyone else. You don't have to hear anybody else's problem, complaining, or where are you going? What's that? What are you doing? What are you going? And it's your own space.
No, I completely understand. And that's why it's kind of a little bit where I'm like, do I really want to live with my brother? But I think, so this is there are times in my life where I've kind of downsized to where everything fits in my car and I can become mobile. And part of me, I'm looking forward to kind of shedding a lot of the things that I've accumulated and becoming a minimalist. And moving into my brother with my brother helps me in that step. But on the other hand, I'm like, ooh, didn't I just want to just get my own apartment? But I'm trying to really hold off. I think the time with my brother and connecting with him will be good. And me taking kind of that moment of just taking a breath and then figuring out where I want to be, because it's a unique opportunity if we're all doing things virtually, where if my job's virtual and I don't have a house or I don't have any obligations, well, and I just need to take my laptop, you might find me in Hawaii or on a beach somewhere with Wi-Fi. You never know.
Yeah, I'm with it. And like I'm actually the opposite, because I've been what does my sister call me? I'm so flighty. Like I'll be like, oh, I'm moving here. Nah, I move here. Oh, I'm gonna live here. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. And so now a part of me wants my own place. Like I want to buy a house in Dallas. That's like my goal. But a not expensive house, just my own house where I can work virtually in Hawaii, but then I see a rug I like, I'm just sending it back to Dallas and I'll deal with that when I get back to Texas. Like, that's my goal. And things change, especially now that I'm going to have my first child. But I'm very blessed to have a uh, very on it partner. Like he's wants to be a part of it. He's all into it. So he knows that if I get that opportunity to be on a TV show for 2 months, then he can have our son for 2 months, and
Oh.
he's not going to try and stop me from doing it.
Oh,
So
that's fantastic. Well, like I said, or one of the science communication people, they just announced their show, and she was 9 months, like not 9 months, but close, 7 months pregnant shooting it. And I
okay,
was like,
well,
yeah.
that gives me hope, that gives me a lot
She's
of
like,
hope.
yeah, I was fully pregnant during that shooting it.
Yeah, well, that's my goal, discovery, and I want to do TV, and I have a great partner, so you don't have to worry about my kid, even though I want him to be involved. I want him at some point, not newborn, but some point to be involved. But anyway, back to you, Dr. Proctor, and all the amazing things that you've done. Like, so are you embracing virtual work, and this is something you want to do futuristically, even when there's not a pandemic going on?
Absolutely. I have always been an early adopter of technology. So during my education career, a lot of the things that I looked at, like for my master's and my PhD, they were all on virtual learning, spatial and virtual. And so I did back in the 90s, like a virtual field trip for my master's. And so it's one of those things where online adopting technology and as a tool to be able to teach and learn has always been something that I've done. So for the last 4 years, all of my classes, all my geology classes have been online. And so learning to teach really well in that environment. So now that we've transitioned to doing that because of the pandemic, I had gotten all my adjuncts to the point where they felt comfortable. And a lot of them, my formal adjuncts from before who had gone off and gotten full-time jobs elsewhere, actually reached back to me and said, thank you. Thank you for making me learn how to do this really well online, because now, I was one of the few people in my group, in my division, who was like, no problem, I got this. and so my PhD is in curriculum instruction, science education, and it's really about teaching with technology, and now being a faculty developer and open educational resources about leveraging technology so that we can make assets free and available not only to students but also to teachers, so that they can reuse and remix and have those materials available worldwide.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's doing that. And like, I probably need to take a virtual class on how to do it. And I think my problem is there's so much I want to do that it's hard for me to get started with just doing one thing, because I really want people to share. Like this podcast I do Wednesdays at 6, but I'm like, well, now that schools are having to be virtual, maybe I should do it at noon and have students be able to join in and ask their own questions and things like that. But I'm like, I don't even know how to get started with that. So it's kind of, I psych myself out, and I'm working on that, because I know that if students were on here now, they'd want to love to ask you questions and be a part of it.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things where I'd always been in the adult educational arena. And funny you mentioned that, because next month I'm going to start teaching kids and doing a couple of live broadcasts for kids. And part of me is a little bit like terrified, but also excited. I've done outreach for kids as in the Civil Air Patrol. I'm the aerospace education officer for the Civil Air Patrol, which is a great program where it gets kids that are interested in aerospace and the military. I was a cadet when I was 14 and 15. And so it's fun to be a senior member and being able to share that. But every time I go in and do my aerospace with them, I'm still like, oh, these are kids, because I don't have any kids of my own. And I'm like, and I never babysat really. So I'm like, so doing this
is for me, the hardest part is not cussing.
exactly.
I want to do it, but I'm like, nope, there's kids here. So let me be mindful of what I say.
So I'm going to have two shows. One of them is going to be a Meals for Mars cooking show for kids. So we're just going to go over some of the basics of cooking. We're going to have my Mars test kitchen. So we just kind of come in and have fun making some cool meals. And then the other one is a geology earth science class that's going to be, I call it the geonauts, where they go and we travel around the globe and looking at geology and the history of the earth and doing those kinds of things. So
can I be in the class? Like, what's the age range for this class?
You know, this is going to be targeted for ages 11 to 13. So you can come on as one of my special guests.
Well, I would love to. Yes, I want to. And that's what I want to do. And that's part of the reason, like, I need my own space, because, you know, when you live with people and they just kind of walk by while you're trying to teach somebody something.
That's one of the things that I'm worried about moving into my brother's, because right now I have this amazing office in my house that I share with my husband, but he's keeping the house as we go through the divorce. And so that's one of the things where I'm just like, and I'm moving into a room in my brother's place. So I'm like, oh, how do I make it all work? But it's, you know, those are the challenges that I feel like makes me stronger, more resilient, more creative. And so I just figure I'll figure it out.
I'm gonna have to adopt your way of thinking, because I'm like, when I have people in the same house with me and I'm like, oh, I want to do this. And then somebody comes and just stares, or they walk behind, or they're opening refrigerators, and you're like, you see this on, right? There's like, but I need to change my way of thinking, because it's what I want to do. And it's like, I want kids to be able to see simple science projects you can do at home with all the things that's already in your house, or things like that. And yeah.
Yeah, and you're right though. You just got to do it, and that's what the thing is that's what I figured out. Is just, you know, I was like, I want to do a cooking show. Oh, okay, this opportunity came up, or you know, how do I teach geology when my career is changing out of the classroom to be the open educational resource coordinator? So I'm not going to be in my normal classroom setting anymore. And so really just saying, okay, I can spin it this way, and looking for those creative outlets. But you're right, I love doing everything too, and it can be overwhelming. And so I've really been working on what is my core mission. And so I came up with the saying, space to inspire. And so everything now is filtered through this lens of space to inspire. But when people are talking about space, they think that I mean outer space. And I'm like, no, when I'm talking about space to inspire, I'm talking about you taking your unique space, this space within one arm's length of you that encompasses everything that you do and everything that you know, and you use it to inspire somebody in some interesting way, or inspire yourself. And so space to inspire is all about leveraging our uniqueness and our strengths to make a difference in this world. And so I really try to keep everything within that message now of what I'm doing.
That's amazing. Oh yeah, just so you know, you are now my mentor. So answer my calls and emails from here on out. But like for me, you know, I did in the know with CaT Bobino. That's like my umbrella thing. But my statement is demystifying and diversifying STEM. And I just really want to break it down so that people, because I'm pretty sure it happens to you when you say, oh, I'm a scientist. People are like, scientist, oh, you must be super smart, or, I can't do all that education. I can't take those classes. And it's like, you really can. It's not that hard. It's all about what you're interested in.
No, I love that, demystifying and it was
Diversifying.
and diversifying STEM. See, that's that, and if you keep true with, that's your core message, in everything that you do, that's really going to shine, and you will get noticed.
Oh, thank you. That's my goal in life is to do that and just, have people realize that STEM is attainable. It's not one of those things that is above anybody and everybody else. I don't even know how many PhDs I've interviewed who got C's and D's in undergrad, and didn't think that they were going to make it.
I was definitely, at least through high school, I was a C student. I was definitely not an A. I was not an overachiever, and none of that. And then I'm just to be straight, undergrad, I missed a lot of classes. I was having fun. It was when I kind of like realized my parents dropped me off the first day, and I was like, what do you mean I don't have to ask permission to stay out all night, or to, who's coming home when and what I want to do? And so I was like, oh, well, this is cool. And so I was running track and just had lots of friends, and luckily I'd always been pretty good at science and math, so it always came easy to me. And so, yeah, but I was not the best student. And I recognize that when I have my students and getting them inspired to do their work and to give it their all. And I think sometimes I wonder where I would be if I would had been a better student.
Well, and I think about that too. I mean, honestly, I was an A and B student, but it wasn't because I was an overachiever. It was just because to me, it wasn't that hard. And so, and then I came from like a super Christian background and parents who were like overprotective. I couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. So why not do my schoolwork, And just like you, when I went to college and now they're gone and I'm in another state and I don't have somebody's like watching me all the time. And I went to an HBCU, I went to Stillman. So now I got all these Black people who are like, oh, let's do this, let's do this. I'm like, what? Me? I can go have fun and be out all night. Yeah, so
you can relate, and that's one of the things where, but the thing about it is I also realize, and I tell the students, you don't have to have it all figured out. These days, there's a lot of pressure to like know what you want to do by the time you turn 18. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay, because you're going to find your way and your path and your passion. And there's so much and because I see a lot of the students that I talk to now, there's all of the internet and the influencers and everybody's doing something cool. And like you were saying earlier, this whole feeling of being behind and jealousy and not having enough of my act together and putting things, and there's always going to be somebody out there doing more. And it's that you can't keep up with that. You can't keep that pace. And I tell them that, as long as can block out some of that noise and focus in on what you can do for yourself in the environment that you have, and take advantage of that and focus on that mental health wise, that will go a long way. And so, but it's hard because, man, I see people who are 20, 21, 22, and their peers are, getting shows and going off and doing things. And they're influencers where they have 150,000 followers on Instagram and they're getting free stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really, and I can just see the weight of that on some of my friends.
Yeah, it's frustrating because you're like, okay, I did it the way I was taught. I went to school, I got the job, I was supposed to get this because I followed the rules. And now you see like 21-year-olds didn't follow no rule and they're doing all these amazing things. And you're like, well, what about me? Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's tough, because it's like, how do you reconcile, these things? And that's where, again, how do you control what is within your grasp, and really focus in on doing the best within that scope as you push yourself outwards. And so now social media, like, I go on and I post stuff, but I don't linger. I do not, I might like a couple of things that some of my friends do as I scroll for just a few minutes, but I won't stay on it too long. And it's not that I don't want to support others in that medium. It's just that that medium has a way of inspiring, but also making you feel jealous and envy and all of these other emotions too. And you really have to balance that out, and figure out, how to cut down that noise and say. And so one of my big things is, because getting a show and seeing other people get a show, and you're just like, dang, is that there's enough to go around. That, okay, that wasn't for me, that was for them. There's enough to go around. Or when me and somebody else I know is competing for the same thing and they beat me out for it, I'm like, okay, you know what, that wasn't mine, that was for them, but there's still enough. My thing is still out there, and keep on going.
yes, that is good. I did. We had someone who was like, yes, teach. So yeah, I gotta focus my mentality on that, and working towards that, because I will be on Facebook way too long. And I'm like, why are you get to do all this? Or I'll be on Instagram. The only thing I'm not good at is Twitter. And I wish I was, because everyone's on Twitter, but I am just not good at Twitter.
And the thing about it is that that's time that, and so now I've tried to put that energy into some of the creative endeavors that I'm trying to do, instead of spending that time looking at what other people are doing. And so talking to you and your unique strengths, you've got something that is unique, that is only that you do, that if you harness that and capture that and bundle it and then share it with the world, you'll be amazed at what happens, especially financial advice. I'm like, you need to be talking to people about finances.
I try, and it's one of those things too. Like I just gotta figure it out. I was telling my partner that we need to do a Udemy class. We've talked about it like 2 months and still haven't done it, but just doing like a Udemy class on finance. But it's one of those things you see on social media. If I share STEM, if I share finance, then I get like 3 likes. If I share a picture, or if somebody shares something about Cardi B, it's 1 million likes,
Yeah, but the thing about it is that I think that will change. And so even now, like, demystifying finances and financial security is, I can tell you, even me, I'm like, man, I'm supposed to retire in 4 years. I'm like, am I even going to be able to? Do I even, have I saved enough? I have no idea. And most people don't. And you'll be amazed at how many young people will resonate to you, being able to talk to them just simple finances about, well, what does this mean versus this? And should I have a portfolio of this or that? And should I have something pre-taxed or post-tax?
Yeah. No, you're right. You are absolutely right. That's something I have to look at. But we are running out of time. So before we run out of time, is there anything that you want to share that we didn't talk about, or what your goals are, especially if you do retire in 4 years? What is it that you want to do?
I really want to re-career to be, again, a science STEM communicator, but I would love also my own show where I get to go out and do some geology around the world and share my love of travel and geology. But it's space exploration, anything that I can do in human space flight training, I'm going to continue to do that. But what I want to, I guess, leave people with is this notion of what an explorer is, because I consider myself to be a modern day explorer. And a lot of times when we think about exploration, and I think to some extent the younger generation and women of color, people of color, is that everything's already been discovered, and so there's nothing left for me to do. But exploration isn't about discovering something brand new for humanity. Exploration is about discovering something new and exciting for you. Like what you can be your own explorer and push yourself to learn new things and to experience new things and really get out there and learn about our amazing world and beyond. And so rethink what it means to be an explorer, because we all are.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, I think I touched on that I never took geology and never knew anything about geology until I went to New Zealand. But with, New Zealand is a volcanic island. And so being shown the pathway of the lava and being shown the formations of the rocks and all that stuff, it was just, I was like, I'm mad that I never took a geology class,
It's not too late.
I know. And it's you and Dr. Lisa White, both of you guys, I was like, I need to rethink science. I've always been into biology and animals, but geology has got something there that I did not.
It's funny you say that, because we joke is that if we could get a biologist, a chemist, and a physicist to just take a geology class, they'd all switch.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all the red tape of research. When you work with something alive, you got to do an IRB and you got to do all this research. When you work with rocks,
nope. There's something exciting about being out in nature and seeing the mountains and the beaches and the thing about in the ocean. I mean, that's all of that oceanography and paleontology and volcanology, seismology, that's all geology. And so what's great is that you can choose. I know people who all they do is travel around the world to study beaches and sediment movement. I'm like, really? Why didn't I think of that one? Where I, and the different types of material that makes up beaches around the world, because not all beaches are the same. Black sand beaches, green sand beaches, coral beaches, rocky beaches. Like, who wouldn't want to do that?
I would. Like, you can introduce me to that person, I have a son on the way. You don't think I'm going to be pushing him just like, hey, these things I didn't do, but, I'm going to push you and hopefully you like it.
You haven't done yet because you're going to be doing them with him.
I will. I will be all with it. Yep. I am all for it. So, okay, how can anyone find you and get in touch with you?
I am at Dr. Sian Proctor on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. I even have a Patreon page if you want to support me and buy me a cup of tea. And so you just Google Sian Proctor. Man, I own like the first 10 pages of the internet for my name. That's what's great about having a unique name, right? You just material out there, but at Dr. Sian Proctor.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone had a great time watching and enjoying. And we had one person from Australia, Melissa. She said she loves geo girl. She loves geology. And but thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story. And be open to me harassing you from here on out, because that is my plan.
Hey, we're connected, and I am so excited. And I really hope that we get to go out in the field and do our own show together, or have some kind of show together in the future, because I think that would be fantastic.
I would absolutely love that. Hopefully soon, when there's no pandemic going on.
I agree.
You have a good night.
Bye, everyone.